Hello again and welcome to my channel where I reflect upon my writing experience, my experience of writing epic fantasy in I Wrote a Book, which I've been doing for 25 years now, and this is when I first began. I spoke in my last video about why I began to write. I should also say at the start that I'm completely untrained. Unless you count as writing or working on training on the job, I suppose you could think of it as, because that's what I did. I just immersed myself in this storytelling and wrote it down as I went along, and then I recrafted it and recrafted it. It's a bit like taking a lump of clay, realizing, or with an objective to create, shall we say, a bust, a head figure. You know what you want to do, but you don't know how to do it. So you just get the clay, get your hands on and start doing it, and you shape the clay. In this case, obviously, the story, the words on the page, and you keep shaping it. And then at first you find it very difficult, but the thing is, you don't give up. You keep shaping it and then taking a step back and then looking at what needs to change and just applying a kind of logic. It's a craft. You keep manipulating the clay, the raw materials, until it starts to take on the shape that you like. And then you get feedback and people give you advice, and you keep working the clay until eventually you get the result you wanted. And so that's what I did with my writing. I wrote and I wrote and I rewrote, and I think they call it stream of conscious writing. That's what I did. I used to think about what I was going to write, think about my story, and when I sat down to write, I'd just write what was in my mind, what was in my head. And that's another important thing for me, is I see the scene. And I write in scenes. I see the pictures. I just basically say what I can see. And I guess that's not for everybody. I don't know if that's what anyone else or many people can do. But for me, I'm fortunate in that once I've thought upon what it is I want to write, then I can see it forming as pictures in my mind, and then I write and I observe it, and then I take a step back and I think, well, what can happen next? And then I picture the scene and I write about what I saw. Never taken a course in my life, and some people might say you can tell from my writing. I don't know. This is the thing, you just don't know, do you? You write stories and you just hope that people like them. Indeed, I started writing for my own pleasure. I think it's fair to say I do enjoy writing. Shaking the table. I do enjoy writing, and I enjoy getting lost in that world and having that control over that world and creating ideas and getting actually also emotionally engaged in that world. So there's the motivation, but the joy of storytelling is in observing the reaction that you get from people that you tell the stories to, isn't it? My mum used to tell stories all the time, and some of them were probably made up. Some of them always had a grain of truth in them, as I understand it. And she was a consummate storyteller, and she used to love telling stories, and the interaction was terrific, and I could see the pleasure that could be gained from being a storyteller, from telling stories, and the interactions. It's entertainment, it's art. So telling stories and visualizing the story as I go along, that's pretty much what I do. Someone will probably have a word for it, a stream of consciousness, I think. Anyway, so I just wrote. And people used to say, oh, I'd like to write. And I'd say, well, write something. But the trick is finishing it, starting. It's not so difficult, really, once you get through the initial phase and get some idea of what you want, and then there is a certain degree of planning, which I'll come on to now. Yes, you do have to have some concept. And so for me, I began with a creation story. I noticed that a lot of indigenous peoples and religions have a story of how we began, how the earth came into being, the moon and the stars and light and day. So I got into this idea, chaos and creation. So these competing forces, darkness and light, there are underpinning themes in a lot of epic fantasy. They're the primary protagonists, if you like. So the light and the darkness, how was it contained and how did it impact in the universe to create the earth? And then where did mankind come from? So I wrote a creation story, which was a theological piece, if you like, which I could then use to inform the belief systems, and what people believe impacts on how they behave, of course. And also in the same way, how people can reject certain ideas and beliefs. So the creation story is where I started to build my fantasy world. And it talks about how, in my creation story, how mankind came into being and how they were cast out onto the earth, and how over time, under various influences, they evolved into different kinds of men, if you like. And these would include elves, dwarves, orc, men. The actual, that dictated, with a number of there being numerous tribes, dictated different habitats and world size and migratory patterns and mountainous regions, and the impact that had on these various tribes and the way that their culture. There's an empire which was based on an interpretation of the creation story, which is false. But because they did incorporate the creation story into their scriptures, it helped them to form a, if you like, obedient population, a military, and how they went on to become the dominant military force in my world. And they created an empire. And the impact that had on the other various communities or tribes. Another tribe was inclined, because of where they found themselves next to the sea. They built a great walled city around a main trading centre. The main heroes in my book are from the northwestern regions, where they were tradespeople, woodsmen and stonemasons, carpenters, farmers. But they were divided by different families and kingdoms, and how they had to become united under one king. So from that creation, and some of these tribes, as I think of them, would be more attuned with the natural environment. And in my creation story, the environment was created by the mother of nature, who I call Rowena, who's the son of the god that created the world and the universe. So they followed Rowena rather than Roan the god. And it made for, it was a good platform on which I could build this story. And once you have that platform, once you then understand how the different tribes, different communities, different groups could then grow into different cultures, the geopolitical parts of it, then you can start to think about the characters. Who are the heroes? Where do you want to start? Chaos and creation. What is under threat by the forces of darkness and chaos? So I went to the northwest, which is where I'm from, of Europe, and I pictured a rural idyll and family, where people lived in plenty, although they were under the rule of the empire, which may have been one of the reasons why they could evolve their economy around a rural economy, and why they did find themselves happy. That's another discussion. But anyway, there's this happy family living in a lush green valley. They rear these wonderful horses called tugs, which are large, magnificent beasts, rumoured to be a cross between the great deer of the northern marshes and the horses bred by the local Lord Wolfhart. And it's Wolfhart's family, the family Wolfhart, where the story begins to take place. They are at the centre of the story, and it's their rural lifestyle and their happiness that's threatened by the coming of darkness. When the young son, Arthur, nearly forgotten his name, Arthur finds a mysterious amulet up in the High Valley, a mysterious amulet which was placed there by a mysterious group called the Northmen. And I do another podcast. Is that what's called, a podcast? On YouTube, where I read the chapters of my book. So if you looked out for that, you might be able to tune into the actual story if you like. So anyway, I'm going to end there. So that's how I began to write the story, and we'll talk about how the characters develop within that context, and other things like, what is a writer, why do I write, what do you do to be able to keep writing, and where do you find enthusiasm from, who can you ask, who can you talk to get inspiration. And we'll look at that overall in my next podcast. So thank you very much for now. Please comment and like and possibly subscribe, and I can keep producing these reflections upon my experience of being a fantasy author. Thank you.